Hi friends, Ms. Freibergel here. Today we need a pencil and a notebook or a piece of paper for our lesson. We are going to be looking at text sequence today. Text sequence is the order in which events happen. Authors can organize information in a text sequence. This helps us make connections within the text. We can make connections within the text using sequence. It helps us understand how events are connected. Each event follows another in an order that makes sense. So if we see a picture of an apple, we would start with a full apple, then we see some bites being taken out of it until we see the eaten apple at the very end. So it makes sense that we have an apple that's full and then some that have a couple bites out of it, and then we would have our eaten apple. To understand sequence, you have to think about the events that happen in the beginning, middle, and end of a text. You also have to think about how do these events lead to one another. Don't forget our sequence words are first, next, then, and last. Okay, let's look at some examples of text sequencing. So remember, text sequencing are events that happen in order. Once those events are in order, it allows us to help understand and make connections in a text. First activity today is we're going to read each of the paragraphs on the left. Then we're going to put them in sequence order. Once we do that, we're going to write them in our own words using our sequence words like at first, next, then, and finally, so that it all makes sense. On the right, I will start reading our paragraphs. Martin Luther King had a plan. He told Black people not to use buses at all. For 381 days, the bus companies lost a lot of money. Years ago, there was a law. The law said Black people had to sit in the back seats of buses. If a white person needed a seat, a Black person had to stand and give away his seat. The plan worked, and the laws changed. People of all races could ride buses, and they could sit where they wanted. In 1955, Martin Luther King said that the law wasn't fair and should be changed. He also said that Black people should love and not hate. All right, so if you recognize when I was reading those paragraphs, they didn't make any sense, right? Because they were out of sequence. So when we are going to rewrite them on the right, we're going to put them in sequence so we can better make connections and understand the text. Right, over on the left, the first thing I'm going to do is number and put these paragraphs into sequence. First thing that happened, I would say years ago, there was a law. That's our first paragraph. That's number 1. First paragraph would be years ago, there was a law. Right, that's setting us up to talk about what's happening first. Our second paragraph would be in 1955, Martin Luther King said that this law wasn't fair. So first we have a law. The next, Martin Luther King is going to say that this law isn't fair. Okay, so it's making a connection that Martin Luther King sees that law that says Black people have to sit in the back of the buses, and he decides, and he says that that law isn't very fair. Next paragraph. We have Martin Luther King had a plan, and we have the plan worked out. Well, the plan can't work out until we know what the plan is, right? So our third paragraph is going to be that Martin Luther King had a plan. The fourth one is that the plan worked out. Okay, now that we've put it in sequence, let's rewrite it in our own words to make some more connections. So at first, what happened first? Years ago, there was a law. The law said Black people had to sit in the back of their seats of buses. If a white person needed a seat, a Black person had to stand and give away his seat. On your piece of paper, start by writing at first, So we could say, at first, there was a law that said we could say, at first, there was a law that made Black people sit in the back of buses. You could also say they had to give up their seats to white people. That was kind of long, but go ahead and pause the video if you need to get it written down. First thing that happened was that there was a law that made Black people sit in the back of buses. They had to give up their seats if a white person wanted it. That's the first thing that happened. Next, we have number 2. In 1955, Martin Luther King said that this law wasn't fair and should be changed. He also said that Black people should love and not hate. So there's a law put in place, and then next, let's make the connection. Next, Martin Luther King says that this isn't very fair. So we could say next, Martin Luther King wanted this law to be changed because it was not fair. All right, next let's see what happened as a result from that. So Martin Luther King wanted this law to be changed because it was not fair. Then, our third paragraph. Martin Luther King had a plan. He told Black people not to use the buses at all. For 381 days, the bus companies lost a lot of money. So let's say then, Martin Luther King created a plan he told people not to ride the buses, and the bus companies lost money. All right, so we made the connection that Martin Luther King saw that this law needed to be changed, and then he created a plan. Pause at any time if you need to get this written down. We have our last paragraph for finally, number 4, the plan worked and the laws changed. People of all races could ride the buses and they could sit anywhere they wanted. So finally, the plan got the law changed. Everyone would ride the buses and sit wherever they wanted. If you look, once we put our paragraphs into the correct sequence or the correct order, it makes sense, right? First, there is a law. Next, Martin Luther King wanted this law changed. Then he came up with a plan, and finally that law got changed. So once we put things into text sequence, it makes sense the order that they go in. Pause if you need to get the rest of this copied down, and click play when you're ready to move on. Okay, we're going to take a look at one more text to continue our sequencing. Our text is called St. Helen's Surprise. Mount St. Helens was beautiful. It was shaped like a cone. It was tall and covered with snow. But St. Helens was not just a mountain. It was a quiet old volcano. On March 27, 1980, something happened. Mount St. Helens made some noise. A small blast made a hole in the mountain's top. On May 18th, St. Helens exploded. Rock and ash flew into the sky. Trees were knocked down. The snow melted. Melted snow and mud filled rivers. The rivers flooded. Ash from the explosion blocked the sun. It made day as dark as night. Wind blew the ash. By May 22nd, ash had blown across the United States. All right, at the bottom, it says read the facts, number them from 1 to 8 as they happen in the story. We're going to do the first 3 together, and I'm going to have you do the rest on your own to practice your sequencing. So let's look at what happened first. We have trees were knocked down, melted snow and mud filled rivers, ash blew across the United States, a small blast made a hole, the snow melted, Mount St. Helens exploded, the rivers flooded, and rock and ash flew into the sky. What's the first thing that happened? Remember, when we're talking about sequencing, it's also what the author writes so that everything makes sense. So in order for all this other stuff to happen, number 1 has to be that Mount St. Helens exploded, right? That's the first thing that happens. And if that doesn't happen, then none of the other things can happen in it. Let's talk about the second thing that happened. So the first thing that happened was that Mount St. Helens exploded. Oh, I see it. So on May 18th, we see first that St. Helens exploded, and then rock and ash flew into the sky. Let's make that number 2. What happened after that? Rock and ash flew into the sky. Trees were knocked down. Number 3. Right. So the first thing that happened was Mount St. Helens exploded. The second thing, rock and ash flew into the sky. And the third thing, trees were knocked down. Go ahead and fill in the rest of those events. Make sure you look back up at the story and think about any of the connections that you can make to help you while you number them. Click play when you're ready to check them. Okay, so let's think about the first thing that happened. Was it trees were knocked down? Melted snow and mud filled rivers. Ash blew across the United States. A small blast made a hole. The snow melted. Mount St. Helens exploded. The rivers flooded, or rock and ash flew into the sky. We're going to put all of these in sequence order. Now see, the first thing that happened was a small blast made a hole in the mountain's top. So we'll put in number 1 next to that. Thinking about my sequencing and my connections that I can make with the text, what could happen after a small blast made a hole? Oh, St. Helens exploded. Let's put that as number 2. So we have the small blast made a hole, then St. Helens exploded. Let's think about what would happen next in the story. Rock and ash flew into the sky. Let's put that for number 3. Go ahead and do the rest on your own, putting them into sequence order. You may look back up at the text if you need to. Get all of your numbers written down and click play when you're ready to review them. Okay, let's go ahead and check these. We said number 1 was a small blast made a hole. Then Mount St. Helens exploded. For number 3, rock and ash flew into the sky. Number 4, then trees were knocked down. Number 5, the snow melted. Number 6, melted snow and mud filled rivers. Number 7, the rivers flooded. And number 8, ash blew across the United States. If you had any difficulty with that, try thinking about the connections that you can make. So we know that the snow melted. After that, we know that melted snow probably filled the rivers. So when authors are putting things into text sequence, they're trying to put them in order to better help you understand something. Awesome job today. I will see you soon.